do I let go of her? How do I let go of the version of me that protected me, that had my back, that kept me safe, that gave me what I needed at the time? Because she wasn't my enemy. She helped me survive. So how do I separate from her? How do I separate from the version of me that loved me in the only way that she knew how? How do I think her without being stuck with her, without being stuck as her? And this is the hard part of healing that we need to talk about. The grief that comes up when you're separating yourself from who you were in trauma and who you are becoming outside of it. That's the part most people aren't prepared for. But before we get into that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Rose, and I'm your host here at A Sister Love Podcast. And I'm just one woman with one voice trying to help other women heal one story at a time. And if you're a woman who is in the beginning stages of healing and don't know where to start and is searching for resources, support, and education, then you are in the right place. I would love for you to become part of my sisterhood. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button, turn on your notification, and never miss another episode of A Sister Love Podcast. And if you haven't already, don't forget to join our Facebook group, Sister Let's Heal Together, where we keep the conversations going, share stories, and support each other along the way. All right. We're going to start this episode off by first talking about what we already learned, because what we already learned is very important for this episode here. So let's start with episode 6 and 7. And if you haven't listened to them yet, I really suggest that you go back and listen, because all of these build on top of each other, right? In episode 6, we talked about identifying the areas of our life that we feel unsafe, right? We talked about what safety is and why safety is important and why safety has to come first in this healing process. Then we talked about how to create the process of identifying the unsafe areas. That's what episode 6 was about. Now, then we move to episode 7, where we're actually start creating a safety plan. We talked about the areas that we already identified in episode 6. And then inside each one of those areas, we broke down what felt safe and what felt unsafe. We identified the triggers. We identified the patterns and the cycles that kept coming up in those areas. We did all this so that we can start creating a more consistency in our life instead of constantly living inside of our pain and allowing that to control us. So now we're here in episode 8. And now we're going to talk about identity, because once we start creating safety, once you start to feel more stable, once you not living in survival the same way anymore, you'll start separating yourself from the pain and trauma that you've been through. That's when the question that's left behind is, who am I now? Who am I when the pain isn't running my life anymore? Who am I when this trauma isn't in charge of the way I used to be? So in this episode, we're going to talk about that, right? We're going to talk about identity. We're going to talk about how pain becomes part of who we think we are. And we're going to talk about what happens when we start separating ourselves from it. And I want to do that by talking about my own experiences, what that looks like for me and what came up when I got to this point in my process. For a long time, my whole identity was wrapped around my pain. I didn't see myself as Rose. I saw myself as the girl who got SA as a child. I saw myself as the woman who had a child with her abuser. I saw myself as a woman with an abusive father. I saw myself as a DV victim. I saw myself as the girl who was bullied growing up. I saw myself as the mother who passed her trauma down to her children without even knowing. That's who I thought I was. I didn't know who I was outside of what happened to me. I never even gave myself a chance to find out. I just let things happen and let it define me. And because of that, I feel like I had excuses for everything. The way I reacted, the way I shut down, the way I snapped, the way I protected myself. And in my head, I was like, well, look at what I've been through. Of course I act like this. Of course I do the things that I do. And nobody really challenged that, including myself, right? Even when people said good things about me, I couldn't just let it be good. If someone would say, oh, you're beautiful, it would turn into I'm beautiful for a DV survivor. If someone would say you're smart, it become I had to be smart for someone who went through all the things that I've been through. If someone said you're strong, that strength was already tied into my pain, right? I never let myself just be beautiful. I just never let myself be smart, be strong. I just had the trauma behind it. And honestly, I wore that shit like a badge of honor. Like Birdman said, put some respect on my name because look at what I've been through. Look at what I survived. But what I didn't see back then is that I was disrespecting myself. I was dishonoring myself. I was shrinking my entire identity down to a few experiences in my life and acting like that's all I was and all I could ever be. And yes, those things are real. And yes, those things matter. And yes, they shape part of me, but they are not my whole identity. And that's the truth. I never allowed myself a space to exist outside of them. And I didn't ask Rose who she was. I didn't ask what I liked. I didn't ask what I wanted. I didn't ask how I wanted to be, right? And I allowed that trauma to be who I was. And as I look back, I've been surviving. And this is just a chapter in my story. It is not my whole story. We cannot allow our trauma to be our story. Only a chapter in that story. And then I had to figure out who was I without the trauma, because I already know who I was before the trauma. That person doesn't exist anymore. She is gone. And I also knew that the person I became after the trauma, the strong one, the people pleaser, the Aggie one, the short temper one, she wasn't healthy either. So I was stuck like, okay, if I can't go back to who I was and I can't stay who I became, then who am I now? Where do I stand now? I had to figure out my middle place, the middle version of me, somewhere between who I was and who I became. Because the version of me after the trauma, that bitch, right? She was my ride or die. She had my back for real. Like she protected me. She kept me safe. She made sure I survived. She made sure I kept going when everything in me wanted to stop. She showed up for me when nobody else did, right? She did things for me nobody ever did for me. So letting her go, that shit hurts because it felt like losing someone who saved my life. She was everything for me. And having to tell her or tell myself that she can't come with me, that hurts. And it left me feeling lost because how do you let go of someone who carried you for years? But at the same time, I knew that she couldn't go with me into my new season. She did what she needed to do. She kept me alive, but I didn't need her the same way I needed her anymore. So I had to grieve her. I had to mourn her. And that grief, that felt like losing someone you love because you're not just letting go of the pain. You're letting go of a version of you that survived it. To help you understand this better, I'm going to explain what actually happens when trauma becomes your identity, why it's so hard to separate the version of yourself that survived the trauma from the version of yourself that you are becoming now. The two version feels connected. For a long time, they had to be. I'm also going to help you start identifying ways to move through the grief that comes up in that separation that keeps you stuck. We're going to walk into the two separate versions, then why it makes you feel confused, lost, and makes you feel like you're betraying yourself. What I learned was this, right? When someone goes through long-term trauma, the brain doesn't just remember what happened. It starts to attaching the person to what happened. It becomes hard to separate what happened from what is happening now. So trauma stops being something that's happening in the past and it starts becoming part of who the person understands they are. It becomes more about what happened to you instead of who you are. And that's when trauma starts turning into your identity. And it becomes hard to separate the two. This happens because the brain needs consistency to function. When pain, danger, or instability lasts a long time, the brain builds patterns around survival. In those conditions, over time, those survival patterns starts turning into how we see ourselves. And that's why a lot of people describe themselves based on what they've been through instead of who they are outside of it. What I also learned is that when healing starts and life becomes more stable, we do not automatically feel relief. Instead, a lot of people feel confused, disconnected, fear, and grief. And that's because the version of the person that survived that trauma is no longer needed in the same way. Now you're being asked to move into something new and something unfamiliar. And that part is unknown territory. And unknown territory triggers survival instinct, even when life actually is safe. So even though the survival version of you was created out of pain, it is served a purpose. It helps to cope. It helps to function. It helps you to go through difficult situations. So when that version starts to change, we experience a loss. And that loss is called self-grief. Self-grief is the emotional process of grieving for the person once was in life, expecting and offering during the trauma. A lot of people try to avoid that part of healing because it's painful. Some of the way people try to avoid self-grief are by distracting themselves, moving fast, minimizing, and telling themselves they don't feel the way they do. When self-grief is avoided, survival behavior gets activated. People start emotionally shutting down again. It becomes harder to connect with others, and you feel stuck and you feel unsafe again, and everything that you work to stabilize will feel unstable again. So what I want to do next is help you understand how to move through self-grief in a healthy way. Self-grief is the emotional process of grieving for the person you once were or the life that you expected to have, often occurring after trauma. A lot of people try to avoid this part of healing because it's painful. Some of the ways people try to avoid self-grief are by distracting themselves, moving too fast, minimizing what they feel, or trying to tell themselves they shouldn't feel the way they feel. When self-grief is avoided, survival behavior gets activated. People start emotionally shutting down again. It becomes harder to connect with others. They feel stuck. Life starts to feel unsafe again, and everything that you work to stabilize starts to feel unsafe again. And what I want to do next is help you understand how to move through self-grief in a healthier way. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to move through self-grief. And the best way I learned to do this is through self-compassion. And self-compassion means allowing the process to exist without judging it or without judging yourself. For me, self-compassion means letting the process happen without fighting it, without rushing it, without acting like it shouldn't exist. We're not trying to make it go away. We're not trying to speed through it. We're allowing it to be what it is. And we're allowing whatever come up. The easiest way I can explain self-compassion is act like your own best friend. Whatever you would say to a friend in this situation, you need to say to yourself. If your friend was going through something like this, what would you say to help them through it? What would you do to help them do it? And how would you show up for them? And that's how I need you to show up for yourself. I need you to talk to yourself the same way that you would talk to them. I need you to treat yourself the same way you would treat them. If a friend was going through something hard and needed someone to be there for them, would you leave them? The answer is no. So why are you going to leave yourself? Why are you going to abandon yourself? You do not distance yourself. You do not run from yourself. You do not say things to yourself so that you do not feel it. You stay with yourself. You deal with it. If you made a mistake, you do not say words like, I'm not enough. I'm stupid. We're not attacking ourselves. We're speaking to ourselves with encouragement, with understanding. And we do not behave harshly to ourselves either. We do not neglect ourselves. We do not punish ourselves. If you are tired, you rest. If you are exhausted, you slow down. If you need to disconnect, you come back to yourself. You can take a break, but you do not run away from yourself. You stay with yourself in this process. You turn to yourself. You give yourself grace. You give yourself patience, and you give yourself understanding. And that's how you move through self-grief without making it harder than it already is. Okay? That's what we're going to do. All right. Let me calm down. Before I end this episode, I just want to say one more thing to you, right? You don't have to allow your thoughts and your feelings to control who you are meant to become. Thoughts and feelings are not facts. They are reactions. They are assumptions. They are shaped by our past experiences. And they only become facts when we act on them, when we turn them into behaviors and let them run our life. We have the ability to separate logic and emotion. We have the ability to pause and choose. And I know it's not always going to be easy. I know sometimes emotions feel louder than logic, but feelings don't get to decide your future. Your choices do. And I want you to know this. It's okay to be something new. It's okay not to know who you are yet. And it's okay to just want to be better. You don't need to have the answers right now. And sometimes, and something that I learned in my walk, especially my walk with God, is that usually one or two things will happen, right? Either God will show you the vision, the end of the road, what you're working towards you, what life could look, right? Or he shows you the next step. You do not usually get both at the same time. If you see the vision, you still need the guidance to figure out how to get there. If you don't see the vision yet, but you see the next step, then that means you're being guided. And for you, I just want you to know that you're right where you need to be. So I don't want you to rush and try to go somewhere that you need to. Just take it one step at a time. As you take this step, the vision will become clearer. And if you already see the vision, okay, allow the steps to be guided. Either way, you're not lost. So be patient with yourself. Don't let your thoughts and your feelings create a reality that isn't true. And don't rush yourself to become something before it's time for you to be there. And if you want help navigating this, right? All this frustration and you have questions, you already know where to go, right? I got you. Our Facebook group, if you're not there, I'm going to definitely need you to be there because that's where we continue the conversation. We support each other. And I hope you in this journey of love, guidance, and healing. And I really need you as much as you need me, if that makes sense. So I really want to be a really good support for you, if that makes sense. So if you aren't in a group, I would love for you to join our sisterhood. The Facebook group is called Sister Let's Heal Together, and you can find the link in the show notes. But until next time, I'm signing out. Your sister DeLove Rose. Bye.